Sit. Relax. All right, and when you're ready.
First, if you're watching, don't get used to this. We're using Jeremy's setup for this discussion. He's got a great professional setup for everything from podcasting to videos. And who is Jeremy? Jeremy is a new friend, friend of a friend, someone who knew a little bit about me and said, you know, I want you to meet this guy. Originally from Barbados, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, he's a proud Bajan.
Very proud.
Jeremy Stevens is a university lecturer through the University of the West Indies. Focuses on economics, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
And your side passion in the discussion we had twice over 2 different meals was about cryptocurrency.
Yep.
Before I go even farther, I mean, as far as your university credentials, if you want to tell them a little bit more about yourself before I explain to you why you're wrong.
All right, I could take that. So for everybody there, thank you for having me. Firstly, Yusef. I am very much a Caribbean man, you know, and I am regarded as one of those more outspoken economists in Barbados. I challenge governments. If you Google me, Jeremy Stephen, Stephen, Barbados, it's fairly easy to see how I've been challenging governments.
When I had to look him up, you got to put Barbados in there, or you'll get the professional fighter who has the same name.
So, but both of us are fighters. But but nonetheless, you know, my issue or my advocacy has always been about economic development. However that may come, and as small island states, we have a lot more vulnerabilities than larger economies that are made from a multiplicity of cities that have more often than not a common agenda under some national interests. Sadly, you know, there's only like 20 or 30 million of us in the Caribbean, but we're split by languages and definitely not.
How many languages do they speak in the Caribbean?
There's 4 main languages in the Caribbean with a few
English,
dialects.
Spanish?
English, Spanish, French, and Dutch. And then
Dutch?
There's Dutch.
Is that just the direct
Aruba, Curacao, St. Martin, and what am I forgetting? ABC, Bonaire, and St. Eustatius, so Statia, and Saba. So there are quite a few Dutch countries, but not more than 1 million Dutch speakers.
Is that just simply a direct result of colonization?
Yeah, we are a playground of colonization. Definitely, I mean, if you do your history, the Caribbean has had a very rich history. The English colonies, for instance, really propped up London. In fact, the Caribbean was more beneficial to the English crown's purse than the American colonies, believe it or not, for a very long time. Very, very long time. From sugar, because cotton was focused more so on in the United States of America, with the exception of Florida with some sugar cane. Barbados had, because of our coral reefs, a very, very, I want to say potent, but a very sweet, like the sweetest sugar you can get on earth is from our country because of this soil combination. So England was always able to trade at a very high margin from our sugar, but then they got sugar very regularly from Guyana. So they were always very plentiful in terms of crops. But the Caribbean itself, although we were united under 4 distinct languages, 4 distinct cultures, we have within those cultures, with the exception of the Dutch and French, believe it or not, had problems with unification. So most of what I champion comes down to good governance, things that allow governments to be, I know you won't agree with this, but
I'm not talking on purpose.
But fruitful, things that would allow governments to be at least not as self-serving as they can be, while not being as draconian as they could be. And one of the things that I thought very early on with respect to cryptocurrencies is that would be a very good vehicle to liberalize foreign exchange.
Slow down. Sorry. What do you mean by liberalize?
Okay, so liberalize isn't the freedom, but for anarchists it's different when you speak to an economist.
Are you calling me an anarchist?
No, that's not what I'm saying. I'm saying that it can be described in 2 ways. From an anarchist point of view, I won't throw any distinct definitions your way. Just I think the discussion will speak for itself. but nonetheless, you will have a case where we believe that foreign exchange and trade in the Caribbean must be controlled by a government. It can't be point to point. It can't be business to business, which has not been good for unification and for economic growth.
Wait, help me understand. The trade is controlled how in the Caribbean now?
Via foreign currencies and capital controls. We have capital controls.
What's the currency in Barbados?
We have the Barbados dollar, and then the other islands near to Barbados, which include Grenada, St. Lucia, St. Vincent, Dominica, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts, and Anguilla. They use a currency called the Eastern Caribbean dollar. They're more unified as a currency, through a currency board as a currency union. Jamaica has its own dollar. Guyana, because we consider Guyana culturally to be Caribbean. If you go to Guyana, it is distinctly not South American by any stretch of the imagination.
What is the language they speak in Guyana?
English. English only. They're probably even more monolingual than Barbados is. So ironically, although they're in between Suriname, which we also consider Dutch Caribbean, believe it or not, they're connected to us through a union called CARICOM and CSME, a common market and economy. So Suriname, Guyana, and then Guyana is between Suriname and Venezuela. So the Caribbean is definitely a melting pot. It's very diverse, and governments have been competing against each other without realizing that there should be some form of unification. So if governments don't realize it, I've always been of the point of view that people must push that agenda. And I very early on, when I first learned about Bitcoin, I saw that as being the common.
How did you first learn about Bitcoin?
From a hippie in Vancouver. A hippie from Vancouver, I should say, was visiting Barbados one day, and actually I'm lying, an old man, he was 65 at the time, a guy called Jacques Deere. If any of you care to research it, he's one of our more prolific TV producers.
Okay.
I had a television show in my 20s called The Price of Everything, and he would be one of my producers. And one morning he asked me if I wanted to speak about Bitcoin, and I hadn't heard about it. And he was surprised because I was known to be very forward-thinking, even as far back then.
You're a prodigy.
In terms of those technological, things, I tend to be very forward-thinking, but that had missed me. I did my research, and I couldn't find anything of interest until a year later. So that would be 2010, when I met this hippie from Vancouver, well, more so from British Columbia in general, but Vancouver definitely. And he spoke about it from an anarchist point of view. I found a common connection between what I saw the Caribbean.
Did you point at me when you said anarchist?
I pointed at my kitchen.
Okay.
I pointed at my kitchen.
Because when you say anarchist, it feels like an uppercase A and a pointing at me. And I just getting that feeling. I mean, it's okay.
I don't really consider you to be an anarchist. Don't get me wrong. Okay. I consider you to be stoic. Anarchy is probably a little too harsh of a term considering our discussions. I just throw it out there just for teasing. But with respect to that guy, he was an anarchist. He did not believe in governments. He believed everybody should be peace and love and multiple sexual partners, even though he was married. That's the kind of guy he was. But a common theme came up, and that was liberalization. And in the Caribbean, one of my working theses for a long time was that liberalization could lead to economic development for our nation. So
liberalization through cryptocurrency.
Through cryptocurrency or through banking the unbanked. Because the region, if you want to include Haiti, because English speakers, when we say the region, we are only speaking about English speakers.
Okay.
So if you wanted to include Haiti, who's also part of our common, not economic union, but common political union called CARICOM. So they're considered to be part of us.
You said something that triggered something in my brain because there's a course through the University of Nicosia. I wrote an article called Bitcoin's Bloody Battles, and I talked about University of Nicosia and Andreas Antonopoulos, if any of you know anything about Bitcoin. And I'm going to say Bitcoin and cryptocurrency interchangeably, forgive me, if that's what I'm talking about. The thing that really got me was a 12-week course that they gave for free. I don't know if it's free anymore. I'm going to leave a link below. But it taught me the underpinnings, and one of the concepts they talked about was something called leapfrogging. There are places in the world where they've never had a central bank, and the central banks they did have were just a den of vile scum and villainy.
Very ineffective.
Very ineffective. So what's happening is you have cultures that are more prevalent than we think, that I believe could be true in some of the most underserviced communities in America, where they've never had bank accounts. They're skipping over bank accounts and just learning how cryptocurrency work over their phone.
Exactly.
And deciding I'm going to have a cryptocurrency account.
And 60% of our people in the Caribbean are unbanked.
So here's where Here's where you and I kind of... Well, let's see how this goes.
Yeah.
I first heard about cryptocurrency around the same time you did.
Yeah.
I would say around 2010. I believe I was living in Shanghai, China. No, that's not true. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's say 7 or 8 years ago, I was living in Shanghai, China. Mm-hmm. And I had friends that kept talking to me, and they would always talk about crypto. Mm-hmm. And it came to my ear because I found out there was something the Chinese government was doing its best to kill. Mm-hmm. And they couldn't. They couldn't get rid of cryptocurrency. Mm-hmm. They couldn't figure out, and I'm thinking this is the second most repressive regime in the world, falling second only to North Korea. Mm-hmm. And cryptocurrency was spreading like wildfire, still is. They've since embraced it, and they're trying to put it into mainstream. Mm-hmm. And I started to research it and got into it. And I did a couple of buys here and there. I'm a big fan of hashtag HODL, hold on for dear life. I'm a big fan of dollar cost averaging, buy and hold. We can talk about those strategies another time. Mm-hmm. But when I realized that it was powerful just because you could use it anywhere in the world, without going through not just egregious bank fees, not just through a government that wants to tax you as many times as possible for the same transaction. And when I say government, that means you who watch this, I'm talking about your government, I'm talking about my government, I'm talking about his government. Because where you and I kind of split heads is I don't believe that there's any government that can be trusted in the absolute sense, particularly for our welfare in the future, particularly for what we're going to have later on. Yeah. Cryptocurrency represents not a get-rich-quick scheme. And when I talk to people about crypto, it's not a get-rich-quick scheme. It's simply a method of holding your value in a place that even if it takes a dip, let's say it's not worth as much anymore, how much did you not pay in holding taxes? How much did you not pay a bank? How much do you value having a currency that says, no matter what happens to me in life, if I choose to leave where I am and go somewhere else, I can take my money with me without having to tie it to my leg like a 1985, kingpin. All right. And it gives me a freedom to, and I hate to say this part, I can just pay taxes on what I do without revealing where my money comes from.
All right, but no, that's a fair assumption. Don't get me wrong. And we do diametrically oppose each other there, where I believe in governance fundamentally, and I believe that there can be a good form of governance even if it means you give up some fundamental freedoms.
Can you give me a few relevant examples contemporarily?
Right, good. Remember the main point. Remember this main point, that you may give up some fundamental freedoms in exchange for good governance. So I like Singapore, for instance. Exactly.
Okay, I've been to Singapore. I spent a little time in Singapore. Beautiful place.
Yeah. And the government
what about
gives up freedoms? They take away, a certain fundamental freedom. So someone like me could not exist in Singapore.
Because?
Well, you don't have freedom of speech in Singapore. Essentially, you can't speak against their government. You can be locked up. You can be politically victimized legally.
So what you're saying is you want to endorse a system that somehow mimics that government?
Let's look at it across a scale.
Okay.
I'm not saying that we should that we should definitely be something like Singapore within the Caribbean. It actually wouldn't work. Be a little too rebellious in that part of the world. But what I'm saying is that there are tenets of good governance that you can learn from Singapore. For instance, the government is very transparent. They release a lot of information. There's freedom of information.
Well, it's easy to be transparent when there's no penalty for doing things that the people don't like.
No, I agree with you there, but I'm saying there's a tenet that you can pull from it. Because at the end of the day, despite, let's say, some of the social issues in the Nordic regions and in Iceland, they probably are the midway between where Singapore is and where everybody else is, in terms of open governance, in terms of civil participation. I am not saying the politicians are not corrupt, because Iceland had to get rid of 2 prime ministers.
Yeah, Iceland, one thing I will give them credit for is modern times. If they catch you, they're going to try to lock you up.
Exactly. And the region, for me, that's a big step in the Caribbean. Like for instance, I shouldn't talk about this since it's in court, but I don't really care at this point since I am not party to the issue. We have a politician in Barbados that has a U.S. citizenship.
Who?
Now, I don't want to call his name. I really don't.
So you want to give me an example that no one can fact check?
Okay, do you mean to be fact checked?
No, I'm saying if you're gonna name someone, if you're gonna name someone,
I'm smarter than that. I've been in this thing a little too long. I'll tell you guys how to find it. Barbados, politician, corruption, insurance fraud. Those are the free insurance fraud. Let me make sure I look at the camera, not my computer. Insurance fraud, and you can even put Innis. the word innis, and you probably would find it, right? It's a big ongoing case, and because
it hasn't been concluded yet.
No.
Has he been found guilty of any crimes?
No.
Then I respect your not naming him. I thought this is someone that had been found guilty.
No, but it is looking bad. But because of the sensitivity of the issue, number one, and because if people hear me say, every Barbadian that would watch
Wait,
this,
Barbadian? I thought you were Bajan.
that's the colloquialism. That's what we call ourselves. But to the rest of you, Barbadian. But yes, it's just a colloquialism. You can use Bajan. No, you in there with us now. You are with us now. You can call any of us Bajan as far as I'm concerned. It's fun. But because you have a history with Bajans. No, or a history with a Bajan. But nonetheless, this guy, he did some very shady transactions, and believe it or not, he's being tried in the United States of America because he's a citizen of the U.S. as well. Here's where it gets interesting. There are no criminal laws or criminal punishments that can happen to him should he return home and give up the U.S. passport. Let's say the U.S. gets
So he went to the United States, committed his fraud.
No, it happened in Barbados, but it used the U.S. banking system. That's how he was roped in. He used the U.S. banking system to hide illegally gained funds. Basically, he was layering them. You know the 3 steps to money laundering. He was
let's back up because I have a history in investments and stuff.
Right.
Please give them the 3 steps so that if you see this, you know to run.
It starts with actually, what's the best way to describe it? Actually just gaining the illicit gains.
Illicit meaning I'm doing something illegal, I'm selling something illegal, or I'm doing something legally but keeping a percentage of the revenue for myself off the top.
Exactly. And then layering is when you combine it with other flows of cash flow that look legitimate.
So what if I have a legitimate job?
Right.
I'm a baker. I bake cakes all day, but I got a brother. He bakes a couple other things in his oven.
And then
so he puts his money into my shop. Yeah. So instead of saying I sold 1,000 in cakes today, I actually sold 1,500. Except that 5, well, that's totally ill-gotten gains. That's layering it into the...
Exactly. And then there's integration where the funds are then pushed through the financial system. So it's banked.
So now once the money's in the bank, that dirty money is now good money because I can say, no, this money came from my bakery. You don't know how many cakes I baked during the day, and that's why stereotypically gangsters and criminals own some sort of a food venue. I have a history in the culinary world, and one of the first things you find out is that it's very hard to track all the money that goes there and out.
Yeah,
and it makes it easy. Now, I do have a dear friend who works for the IRS, and one of the things he said is what most people don't know is what the averages are. He says, we can look at an area and tell you how much your restaurant should be making, but they only know to look for someone when they know to look for someone. So you've got the gaining the money, mixing it with clean money, then pushing it through the system, because once it's in the bank, now I can take that money and buy a trip around the world, buy a new television with the ill-gotten gains.
Yeah, no, so agreed. So the problem was that he was caught a little bit during the integration, but it was more how it was layered. He was using some dentists, but yet it was insurance fraud. Essentially what was happening, just for your benefit, and why I believe heavily in a pseudo Singapore model, was this. He essentially was given a contract or awarding contracts to one of our largest insurance companies in the Caribbean in exchange for obviously money being paid. Now the money never landed in Barbados because it came out of another Caribbean country through the United States of America, and how that money was paid out because it was an insurance firm. Invoices were sent from this dentist's office in New York State. Because of course it's health. It was health insurance related, so these fake invoices were being sent and being paid. So that's where the integration problem was. So he was caught, not integration, sorry, layering. So he was caught through layering because that particular insurance company apparently got caught up in something else, and when the feds were actually investigating what was going on, they saw a lot of these invoices that made no sense. Tens of thousands of dollars going out in some dental insurance thing from a company that has no people in the Caribbean nor even a prior relationship to the insurance company. So he got caught up with that, and he was easily tried because he is a U.S. citizen. So they waited until he came after he lost the election, because his party lost the elections last time, and he came over or returned to the States on holiday. They nabbed him then. So, but if he's released, because the case, I think he has to go back to court in 2 weeks' time for I think the final judgment, either July or October will be the final judgment. If he gets off, because it's punitive, it's only like $30-something thousand they're charging him for, or not punitive, it's small, but if he gets off, it is evident that the crime was committed in Barbados. It was evident as per our anti-corruption laws, which are very loose in the Caribbean, I would tell you.
Right. Okay.
That he should be punished somehow.
Is there a law currently on the books that would get him?
No, that's the messed up thing. At most, he could lose a job, but he already does not have the job. He would have lost office, but he would not be fined. As per our, and this is throughout the Caribbean, Jamaica has changed. Jamaica now has fines. Nobody goes to jail for that kind of stuff.
So let me get this right then.
Yeah.
You're advocating for giving more power to governments who are already ineffective.
I'm advocating for better governance first, and then we can deal with our
But
issues.
until those halcyon days of better government show up, do you not think it is an imperative for you and I to simply ensure our own? And for I was often taught when I was young, success isn't a number. Success is when you can provide the people you love with things you want them to have.
Right.
If our responsibility is to ourselves and the people in our tribe, however you define your tribe is up to you.
Right.
Isn't it imperative for you to look at the world the way it is, not the way you hope it will be, and say, if cryptocurrency allows me to put money in my pocket and not have to cry every time yet another from all political parties they're coming from mismanages or skims the money, because remember, you don't catch everybody, you don't even catch most.
Right, agreed.
Especially when we live in countries like the United States, where our K through 12 education system isn't even in the top 10. Especially in the United States, where we have laws that have yet to catch up to people like the Clinton Foundation, which was just a monster. I'm going to have to do an entire show on that. Why would you ever not advocate wholly, just running across, just running through the forest saying, put your money in some sort of a hidden crypto, learn how to create a secret wallet, put your money in there? What would you possibly have against that?
That's where it started. But remember, as I told you, we're small, vulnerable economies. One of the other things I did not mention is that we all import our foods.
Okay.
The problem with doing that is that it is what we would consider capital flight. Capital flight in a small island, 300,000 people, can destroy.
I know what capital flight is. Can you give a very clear example for the people watching?
Capital flight is when people decide that they no longer have a faith in their own currency, and they decide to trade it for some other currency, which they can use elsewhere, save the money elsewhere, or you can save it locally, but it just means that it can't be touched. You wouldn't probably bank it or whatnot. So that's capital flight.
Capital flight happens in a lot of countries when the government isn't a government you can trust. Yeah. Whenever you have countries where the currency either rapidly changes or constantly goes up or constantly goes down, those people are seeking to put their dollars, their money in euros or American dollars, because those are more stable, or the most stable of all governments, even though those might change. So capital flight, I understand that capital flight can ruin a nation, but it wouldn't be capital flight if people were holding their money in cryptocurrency, and then when they need to buy a new shirt.
It's how it's paid for. So if I wanted to buy, because there are only OTC markets in Barbados, over the counter, so face to face, or you would have your wallet on your phone, and I know you and whatnot. There's one exchange, but that exchange isn't liquid enough to handle the transactions. So what has been happening in the Caribbean is that US dollars make their way out of the country in the following manner. Let's say for instance, I'm going to sell you some Bitcoin.
Okay.
I will take that payment not in Bajan dollars. Because the reason I got into Bitcoin first is for the reasons that you have, because most of the guys who invest in this very early on, and most of the people who are there now, invest for the reasons you speak about. But the problem has always been this. I will take out US dollars. Those US dollars are earned primarily, especially if it's a cash investment, a cash transaction, that comes primarily from money earned through foreign exchange transactions.
So help me understand this story, if I'm telling the story correctly. I'm a guy that sells bottles of water, and we're in your hometown down in the Caribbean enjoying the day. You want to buy this bottle of water, and it costs, I don't know, a few tenths of a Bitcoin.
Right.
When you pay me for this in Bitcoin, I don't go to the Bajan market and purchase things with that Bitcoin. Instead, I go to another country, if possible, and I withdraw the money as a currency, not Bajan dollars.
Good. So the problem at this time is that those transactions, number one, wouldn't necessarily happen because the cost of doing those transactions, the mining fees and whatnot, would make buying a bottle of water a bad example. So, but it's not to say what you're saying is wrong. You are quite right in that I know, as the person who received the Bitcoin, can go wherever, buy wherever with that Bitcoin. The problem is how people get into the market in a country like ours that doesn't have e-commerce.
You can get. I can teach someone to get into the market in 5 minutes on any cell phone anywhere in the world.
I agree with you, but I'm talking about what is. Remember, you told me to look at it this way: what is as opposed to what can be. So we stay there for now. I would join you on that journey, my brother, but you put me in this direction. Good. So, what is right now that most people in Barbados don't have e-commerce access to e-commerce? In fact,
like Amazon.com, things like that.
You do have access to the websites. To purchase on them is the problem because credit card penetration in Barbados is below 60%.
Good.
Number one.
That's a conversation we'll have later. When I was a financial professional, I had people leave my office when I said my goal is for you to not have any credit cards because there are billions of dollars being spent every day to convince you that you need a credit card and you don't. That's a different conversation.
Right. No, but access to credit is a very huge problem everywhere, but in the Caribbean it can be nasty because most of our banks aren't locally owned either, and they see us as high-risk jurisdictions. So they own mainly by Canadians. So the problem stems from a lot of systemic issues where, for instance, then, that you don't have access to that credit. So to buy off of a random exchange like cex.io, I loved when I was into Bitcoin up to last year. Because as I told you, I fundamentally
cashed out, right?
I cashed out entirely. So I'm holding Ethereum. I am holding Ether. I have more faith in Ether. We could discuss that. But
why would you have? No, you're right. That's a different conversation.
I have a lot more faith in it for a number of reasons. But I'm not saying that Bitcoin is bad. It just doesn't fit my own outlook.
So you avoid Bitcoin from a, I don't know, ethical standpoint?
No, from a futuristic standpoint. The technology to me is no longer nascent, and it doesn't solve a lot of the issues that I think that needs to be solved by blockchain technology. It solves financial inclusion, right?
Can you think of a bigger issue?
Hold on. That's the pro. The con is how those transactions are verified until all of us agree that proof of work, which is the way, just for simplicity.
We'll do this one again.
Yeah. It's just a way that those transactions are verified.
Well, I don't want us to get lost in the weeds. What I want to do is ask, do you believe that it is a fundamentally bad idea to advise someone, be they in the United States or in the Caribbean, or if I was one of your students and I came to you and I said, Grandma died, she left me this little pot of cash.
Yeah.
Do you think I should shove this into Bitcoin? What are you going to say to that student? What advice would you say to her? No, don't put it in Bitcoin. Put it in what?
I would tell
a bank from Canada? Well, that's also...
No. I would tell them Ether.
So cryptocurrency fundamentally you believe?
Yeah.
And
I would tell them put it in Ether. I would tell them put it in Ripple. I would tell them put it in Cardano. I own a lot of Cardano still. Cardano is actually headquartered in Barbados.
Is it a major company?
It's Canadian, but they're using our taxes. We have very generous. It's not offshore anymore. It's onshore because it's just one tax rate. But our case in point, corporate taxes 5%, my brother. If you make over $1 million.
Oh,
5%.
But what if you're a small time hustler like me?
Sorry, 5% if it is small time. If you were earning like tens of thousands, your profits, 5%. It goes down to around 0.5% if you're bringing in tens of millions of dollars in profit. We have a sweet tax deal in Barbados right now. Sweet. On the personal income side is actually coming down, so because I earn, I'm open about this.
I'm thinking some things, and I'm not going to say those things on camera.
Because I earn upwards of or around 80,000 US, 100,000 sometimes US per annum. My top tax rate is going to move down from 35% as of July 1st that just went to about 22, and then I think the top rate goes down in January to about 18%. Okay. So in terms of taxes in Barbados, it's looking pretty decent.
Is Barbados a country that actually pays not lecturers but teachers? Are they paid what they're worth?
That's a tough one. If you work for international school or a private school, yeah.
No, I'm saying I'm just a little brown boy from Barbados going to a regular school.
You mean teaching at a regular school?
Yeah.
A regular public school?
Yeah. Are those teachers paid what they should be paid?
No, they're not. The irony is that there's such a big pay gap between, say, a very junior lecturer at the university level and a very experienced teacher at the public secondary school level. Our primary school level is top 10 globally. It's actually fairly good. Our secondary school level ranking used to be top 10 when I was at school, and this is with respect to like the World Bank the World Bank and those rankings that they do, and doing business reports and whatnot. But now it's fallen to secondary school top 20 thereabouts. So, and tertiary obviously isn't even top 100, because you guys globally in the developed world invest so much more in your tertiary resources than you do in your primary resources.
But tertiary, we're talking about
college, right?
Because it's a language issue.
Oh, they don't use tertiary?
No, we say
I never even realized that.
That's why I want to make sure
right?
that college or university. That's why I want to make sure that.
Oh shucks, I'm so sorry.
That's okay. Whenever
I know this, but
Well, you and I have certain. Here's a dirty word. You and I have certain privileges of having a global lifestyle that allows us to have access to other ways of thinking and talking. But I want to stay approachable. Speaking of approachable, when I showed up, I had on a crisp white shirt that I'd had dry cleaned, and he's like, "What? Why are you wearing a suit shirt?" I was like, "But what if your students see this? You're a lecturer." And he said, "Don't worry about it." So I quickly threw on a tank top,
which we call vest.
That, yes.
It's so amazing, British English versus American English, huh? But yeah, what was I saying? Sorry. Put me back on track there.
Well, let's not get too lost in the woods.
Right.
You're saying that if a student comes to you and says, "Grandma left me this pot of money, should I invest it in a crypto?" You have no problem with them putting it in anonymous crypto?
No.
Okay.
Not at all. But not for the reasons that you and I oppose on.
So you believe that at some point cryptocurrency can save a government, despite the fact cryptocurrency, you could say, was born and bred to be anti-establishment. It was actually engineered in a way to make it easier for an individual to use it.
Correct.
Than any establishment. Because I've seen businesses rise and fall trying to use old world thinking of money, saying, "I'm going to apply it to crypto," because people know. I told them crypto isn't magic. It's a different class of value. But it has its own rule, just like trading capital funds does and anything else. However, when you really look at it, it takes all the responsibility and puts it on you. The good news, we live in the technology age. We can put someone in a situation where they can learn how to completely anonymously set up a cryptocurrency account. And I've done this with people. Set up a cryptocurrency account, put the money in there, and the government never gets to touch it or see it. Until you do something and you choose to pay your taxes. But my question to you is, do you think that that's a bad thing?
No, I'm not going to say that that's a bad thing. I believe financial inclusion means that you have ways and means to make a life for yourself.
So you're saying I'm right?
I am saying I agree with you on those points. I will not fall for these traps. I've dealt with journalists way too long.
I'm not a journalist. I just
not, but you just pull a good move. But you just pulled a typical one. It's like, yes, let's summarize this. This guy Stetson Bab. I hope he sees this. They're one of our senior journalists. Stetson loves to do that. You would give him what you would hope is a very clear outline, a clear position, and then he'd be like, "So what you're saying is..."
Well, listen, you give him my email, my phone number.
I love Stepson.
Tell him to give me a call. We'll chat.
Nah, he's good people's, man. Trust me. He's good people's. I give him this. I understand why he does what he does. It's tough out there being a journalist. Those journalists make nothing in the region. I've heard
Could it be, and I'm trying to think of a way to say this as a non-pejorative, could it be provincial thinking to keep thinking of your economy, the Bajan economy, what cryptocurrency does, be it Ripple or Bitcoin or any of them,
right.
You are not, because people, I had a gentleman talk to me the night, he says, "I'm looking at buying some Brazilian Bitcoin," and I said, "Well, that's new." Brazilian Bitcoin. He says, "Yeah, Bitcoin, but I want to buy some in Brazil." And I said, "Well, why do you have to buy it in Brazil?" He didn't understand that cryptocurrency, and this is something some of you may not get, it's not attached to a country. That's why China couldn't stop it. That's why once the genie is out of the bottle and you understand how it works, you really can use it to your own ends.
Yeah.
And what I tried to explain to him was, you're no longer looking at your money in one area, which no government likes this. I want to be clear. Every government in the world is terrified of the concept of a blue-collar, average working person like me and this guy, and probably you, finding a way to manipulate our funds the way the ultra-wealthy do. I spent 9 years as a financial professional. I was paid to legally find ways to help people put their money away and pay little or no tax. That's what I did, and I'm not ashamed because it gave me my freedom. But I'm telling you, the theory behind what I'm doing is not some wild, guy that just came in from the wilderness saying, "Let's shake up the system." I'm telling you that the only people who play by the rules, and this is a societal critique, the only people who play by the rules are the middle class, who will never move past that. The two groups of people that never pay taxes are the very poor because they have nothing, and those who are above middle class or even at higher levels of middle class because they understand how to manipulate the system. But it's always going to be those those regular working folks like my parents, your parents, the people who are watching this, who are stuck in a situation where they're consistently being told, it'll get better, don't be selfish. Meanwhile, we'll have, which was the report? Was it the, what was the report that came out last year that proved that millionaires all over the world, regardless of government, was hiding money, and they showed the ways they did it? What was the name of that report? Because the Pelican Brief was a movie, and that's not it.
No,
I
just know about the Panama Papers.
That's it, the Panama Papers.
Panama Papers, yeah.
The Panama Papers, and you should Google this. It got almost no attention in America because why would any major corporation?
It didn't get attention there.
No.
Some of the biggest culprits were Americans, man.
Well, yeah. Well, if you Google that, you'll find out that every person you know of serious means, not just actors, but politicians from all scales, they have specific sets of services that they put together, and people sell them these services to make absolutely certain that they never pay taxes on their money. I'm telling you that what they're doing is wrong. I'm telling you that what they're doing is unethical. But a terrible lesson I had to learn, and I don't know if it's better or worse. I was probably robbed of a part of my childhood because of it. I had to learn very early, the nice guys generally don't win that often. The guys that approach the world by saying, I'm not going to use these methods because if I just keep doing things the way everybody else has, my result will be different. I chose to be a have instead of a have-not. I'm fortunate. I was never in a situation to have to break the law. I was never in a situation to have to, but I also learned that if I didn't use the same tactics and financial strategies that the wealthy use, I would still be, I would be on the hamster wheel, and I'm not going to do that. I'm just not going to do that. Is it a nice thing? No. Does cryptocurrency allow me to be selfish in a way that my grandfather or my father couldn't have? They could never have put themselves in a situation to extricate themselves from a system that has never been there for them. And stop the show. I'll play the race card. If you are black, if you are brown, can you convince me of a situation where you believe that you have the ethical obligation to your country, unless you're living someplace in Africa, to play by those rules?
Well, it's fair. That's a fair thing to say, you know. It's actually very fair. I can't dispute it.
I had a conversation on O'Shea Duke Jackson's channel, and they were talking about it. He has these things called Sunday Night Rumbles where people just get crazy. I've been on and it's just a madhouse. People are throwing words at you, and you're ducking and driving. You're trying to have a reasonable conversation. You just get hit with some phrasal verb. You're like, what? That doesn't even make sense. In any case, they talked about reparations, and they said, what could you possibly do? Well, how about this? Give us a tax holiday. How's that? Give anybody who's the descendant of a slave a tax holiday. You know what? That should be. We can have that as a different discussion. I think we've been running hot for a while now, and I don't want to take up too much of these people's time. Are we going to do this again?
Nah, boy, definite. I'm in Brazil for what? Dos semanas? I can't pronounce Portuguese.
I actually met somebody whose Portuguese is worse than mine.
I can do Espanol.
Thank you, my friend.
Yes, man. Dos semanas.
Bye.
Bye-bye.